In the end I gave up on sleeping and got up. At that moment Taikyu opened the door and came out. Were you also not sleeping? I woke up. Perhaps Taikyu was also having the same worries. Should we have a beer? Taikyu nodded. Yeah. We headed to a nearby convenience store. As time passed there wasn't even a person passing by. We each grabbed a 500 ml can and sat down. The cold air pierced through our clothes. Already feeling emotionally cold, the weather was disgustingly cold too. As we drank our beer, Taikyu asked, Samsung Electronics won't go up more, will it? I don't know. Normally people worry about stock prices falling, but we are worried about it going up. No one knows whether the stock price will rise or fall tomorrow. If they did, they would have bought or sold earlier. One thing I know is that L6 will be discontinued. We adopted a strategy of buying put options and short selling. It was a complete bet on the decline of Samsung Electronics stock price. Options are originally for risk hedging, not for going all in. Our predictions were wrong and the stock price moved in an unexpected direction. Tens of billions were already lost. I looked at Taikyu and asked, Aren't you resentful of me? Taikyu looked up at me. Why would I resent you? If I hadn't suggested investing, this wouldn't have happened. To my words, Taikyu chuckled. What are you talking about? I was the one who suggested investing. If it wasn't for you, I would have lost everything during Mountain Hill's bankruptcy. Well, that's true. Just because he helped doesn't mean the current losses are excusable. L6 is Samsung Electronics' premium smartphone and a cash cow in the IM division. It's not easy to discontinue such a product just because there are some issues. Were we too naive from the beginning? We drank our beer in silence for a while and then Taikyu broke the silence. And it's not over yet. Huh. Will all the problems really be solved through a recall? Samsung Electronics stated that the cause of the fires was battery defects. They claimed that replacing the batteries would solve all the problems. But what if it's not the battery issue? After barely calming the public outrage with a mass recall due to the worsened perception from the explosions, if the recalled products exploded again, there would be no choice but to discontinue them. Could it be that our predictions are still wrong? The problem is time. There isn't much time left until the option expiration date. After the recall announcement, L6 explosions continued. Samsung Electronics recommended discontinuing the use of L6 and, as a safety measure, enforced an update to limit the L6 charging rate to 60%. Until the recall is completed, it was announced that through the AS Center and Telecom Agency branches, replacement phones would be provided, and for consumers who wish to receive a refund, would be refunded without returning the gifts if only the main body is brought in. Despite the continued explosions, surprisingly, the demand for refunds wasn't very high. The premium phone market was firmly divided between ENP and Samsung Electronics. As a result, most consumers chose to wait for the recall instead of opting for a refund. Only 2% of consumers chose a refund. To meet the recall schedule, Samsung Electronics even worked on holidays and operated factories to produce inventory. 1 week after the recall announcement, finally the recall began. The new L6 being sold now was almost the same as the previous product, except that the battery color displayed on the screen had changed to green. In a press interview, CEO Jo Dongjun said, I sincerely thank the consumers who trusted and waited for Samsung Electronics. We will repay them with the best products and services. Along with the recall, resales took place. The waiting demand due to sales suspension shifted to the telecom companies. In one day alone, 30,000 new subscriptions were made domestically. Both consumers who exchanged for new products and new buyers expressed satisfaction. As the recall and resale proceeded smoothly and uncertainties disappeared, Samsung Electronics stock price, which had been stagnant, began to rise again. The stock price, which had lingered around 1.6 million won, increased by 4.1%, exceeding 1.75 million won. Our losses had now snowballed to over 9 billion won. Taikyu, checking the balance, gasped in astonishment and let out a sigh. This is a complete disaster. Out of the initial 13 billion won, only a mere 3.6 billion remained. To recover the initial investment, a profit of 250% would now be required. Thankfully, he had engaged in some short selling. Otherwise, if he had gone all in on put options, there would likely be hardly any money left. The put options he had bought for tens of billions had turned into scraps. It was currently impossible to dispose of them. Taekyu mumbled with a blank expression on his face. Easy come easy go, they say. But who knew money earned through Bitcoin would disappear so easily like this? There was nothing to say. Even if I were to mention that there are still 3.6 billion left, it wouldn't bring any comfort. I also lost about 600 million. Just thinking about it made my head feel light and it felt like my insides were burning. If I felt like this, how would Taekyu be feeling? There's only 1 week left until the option's expiration date. If nothing changes by then, it will truly be the end. Who would have thought that a wrong prediction could lead to such a disaster? If I hadn't touched the options, I could have avoided this level of loss. I recalled Sunbei Sangyip's words before parting ways. If you mess up with options, you can lose everything in an instant. I really did lose everything in an instant. I stood there with my arms crossed, lost in thoughts. Was the prediction wrong or did I miss something? Taekyu kept muttering. I should have gone all in during the OPEC production cut meeting. If I had done that, I could have easily earned hundreds of billions. Opportunities always seem bigger in hindsight. Taekyu scratched his short hair frantically and said, well, it doesn't matter. I lived well even when I didn't have that money, so whatever. But still, if I had that money, I could have lived even better. I picked up the L6 lying on the table. It was the replacement Taekyu had brought back from the exchange at the communication company. I touched it several times but didn't see anything special. But in that moment, something appeared faintly in front of my eyes, almost like a vision. I clenched my teeth and focused my mind. When the expiration date passes, the option turns into scraps of paper. It doesn't matter to us whether Samsung Electronics, which discontinued L6 after the option expiration date, is plummeting. When exactly will it discontinue? Show me something, please. Suddenly, a hologram appeared in front of me. What is this about? Kang Jin-Hu. I snapped my eyes open at the shout. Taikyu's face came into view. Sighing. A ringing sound echoed in my ears as my brain vibrated. I grabbed my head and staggered. Taekyu exclaimed in surprise. Hey, are you okay, Jin-Hu? Noisy. The shouting beside me seemed to make my head throb even more. It took a while for the ringing to subside. Taekyu glanced at me and asked in a hushed voice. What did you see this time? It's in 4 days. Huh. It will be discontinued in 4 days. Taikyu's expression turned to surprise. Really? I nodded my head. If this is really a superpower, that's how it will be. I was lying on the couch, resting, when Taekyu, who had been looking at the L6, suddenly shouted. Why? Don't tell me you saw something too. Do superpowers really exist? Taekyu shook his head. No, it's not that. There's news of an explosion. I was taken aback. Turn on the computer. We sat in front of the computer and started searching for news and forums in earnest. Surprisingly, there were 2 more explosion incidents. One in Canada and one in China. China, as the second country to release the product, opened reservations for sales from the day the recall started. However, on that day, a post with a picture of the exploding L6 appeared on the Chinese portal site Baidu. Samsung Electronics collected the products for investigation and announced suspicions of intentional ignition using a microwave. However, the informant who posted the message did not respond to rebuttals, deleted the post and disappeared. The next post was from Canada. When Samsung Electronics offered to collect and investigate the product, the informant only mentioned compensation and refused to return the product. Moreover, they did not disclose the purchase location or product serial numbers, raising suspicions of a fabricated story. And this time it was in Korea. After receiving the replacement product, placing it in a case and plugging in the charger, it suddenly caught fire. Samsung Electronics stated that they are currently collecting the products for a detailed investigation. I closely examined the pictures posted by the informant. They didn't seem much different from the ones posted before. 2 hours after the product recall, Samsung Electronics' investigation results were reported as breaking news. It was an unusually swift response. They say it was ignition due to external shock. Samsung Electronics announced that the large scar on the back of the case corresponded with the point where the ignition began. As evidence, they released CT scans and X-ray images to the media. Dozens of comments quickly followed. Trying to fake it for compensation money? Could Samsung Electronics have tampered with it? Isn't it strange to announce it after just 2 hours of waiting? Mine is intact, why does it keep exploding? Yours might explode if you have one too. In a subsequent article, it was stated that an accredited external agency would be invited to conduct an investigation, and any media outlet could observe the process if desired. I doubt they would go this far if they weren't really confident. So, could it really be an ignition due to external shock? Regardless, it was clear that even after the recall, ignition incidents continued to haunt L6. Therefore, Samsung Electronics was putting all efforts into shaping public opinion. Watching him, Taikyu said, "Doesn't Yogi Berra's saying come to mind suddenly?" Which country is Yogi Berra, a yoga player from? Yogi Berra, right? Although the name was wrong, I could understand what he was trying to say. Is it not over until it's over? Samsung Electronics attributed the cause of ignition to Samsung SB batteries. Therefore, all replacement products now feature Chinese BTL batteries. But why did it explode again? Is this also a staged act or is there another issue? I raised 2 fingers. Only 2 days left. Yogi Berra was an iconic American baseball player, manager and coach. He played 19 seasons in Major League Baseball, primarily for the New York Yankees, and is widely regarded as one of the greatest catchers in baseball history. Berra was an 18-time All-Star and won 10 World Series championships as a player, more than any other player in MLB history. Berra was also known for his humorous and paradoxical quotes, often referred to as yogiisms. Some of his most famous sayings include, "It ain't over till it's over. When you come to a fork in the road, take it." You can observe a lot by just watching. These quotes have made him a beloved figure not just in sports but in American culture as well. You can read up to Chapter 51 plus. Korean time 7:50 a.m. On Hawaiian Airlines flight HAL 745 from Las Vegas to Hawaii, a mid-air explosion of L6 occurred aboard the aircraft. The L6 in a passenger's pocket exploded, causing burns to passengers' thighs and fingers, leading the airplane to make an emergency landing just 30 minutes after takeoff. Passengers were reported to have exchanged the L6 the day before as part of a recall. This news spread immediately to global media outlets, prompting all airlines in the US to ban the carrying of L6 in both cabin and checked luggage. In Korea, urgent news reports were shared as passengers who possessed L6 were shown stranded at airports unable to proceed. 8:35 a.m. An emergency meeting was convened at the Samsung Electronics headquarters in Gangnam. Black sedans steadily entered the parking lot of the Gangnam headquarters. President Jo Dong-jun of the IM division and executives, including Vice Chairman Lim Jin-yong, were captured by the broadcast cameras. 9 a.m. Immediately after opening, Samsung Electronics plummeted by a staggering 10% as trading commenced. The Kospi index also dropped by 38 points. Foreign investors unloaded their positions in futures and stocks, dumping Samsung Electronics shares. Subsequently, institutional investors also engaged in selling, causing a decline of up to 13% by the afternoon session. Investors' focus was solely on the Gangnam headquarters. Countless articles were posted on the internet. Brokerage reports poured in, mostly recommending buying Samsung Electronics shares with no sell recommendations. During the financial crisis, Samsung Electronics stock price fell to the high 300,000 won range. At that time, investment expert director Park Il-chan remarked, "The opportunity to buy Samsung Electronics at this price will not come again." Subsequently, Samsung Electronics shares increased more than fourfold, proving his statement correct. Similarly, despite the unprecedented event of the L6 explosion, this appears to be a short-term setback. For insightful investors, now is the best opportunity to buy Samsung Electronics shares at a low price. Is now a good time to buy? I muttered in disbelief. These crazy people. If they think it's so good, they should buy some themselves. Institutions were recommending aggressive buying, yet they were pouring out selling orders themselves. What kind of contradictory behavior was this? Thanks to the continuous rise in articles and reports, while institutions were all selling, individuals were struggling to support the buying. Of course, individuals are not fools. The reason for their buying might be the judgment that they could avoid the worst-case scenario of discontinuation. After the meeting and the plan is announced, the plummeting stock prices will likely rebound. What choice will Samsung Electronics make? N. That is why you should avoid the share buy, sell recommendation from anyone. Do your research. Samsung Group headquarters in Gangnam, conference room. Not just the IM division but the entire executive team gathered in the conference room, excluding those on business trips. These gathered individuals were nothing less than the brains behind Samsung Electronics, South Korea's top company. Their combined salaries easily exceeded billions. The reason they were gathered in one place was the unprecedented event of the L6 explosion. Hence, everyone sat in the room with dark expressions, speaking very little. Vice Chairman is coming in. As Im Jin-young entered the conference room, the executives all rose from their seats. Please be seated. Im Jin-young took the chairman's seat. The original occupant of that seat had collapsed a year ago and was still hospitalized. Even if he recovered, it would be difficult for him to return to the management front line. Im Jin-young was only titled vice chairman, but effectively he was no different from the chairman of Samsung Group. He looked around at the executives and said, I believe you all know the current situation. If the battery was the issue, why did the product explode after the battery replacement? The executive's gaze turned to President Jo Dong-jun of the IM department. President Jo Dong-jun spoke up. The cause of the explosion is currently under investigation. How long do you think it will take for the results to come out? Jin-young asked. President Jo Dong-jun replied, it could be as soon as a week, but more time is needed to accurately determine the cause. The problem was rushing into a recall. Even if it takes time, they should have found and handled the cause thoroughly. Is there a solution? Director Kim Myung-soo, who was in charge of future strategies, said. For now, we need to buy time with the recall announcement and find and resolve the cause in the meantime. Are you suggesting another recall? Buying time is a priority. It was no longer convincing to repair now. A recall was the best solution. The issue was that this was already the second time, and the question was whether they could find the cause in the meantime. To minimize losses, that's the best way. There was another option, but no one mentioned it because the expected losses were too great. The consensus was to delay, find and solve the problem. Now the decision was up to the owner. Jin-young couldn't make the decision easily. What is truly the best course of action? What decision would my father have made? His grandfather founded the company and his father raised it. Leading the company after his father collapsed was his responsibility. As he pondered, something caught his eye. On a shelf in the corner of the conference room was a wooden model ship on display. Im Jin-young remembered his grandfather carving wood to make model ships in his childhood. His grandfather would sit him on his lap and say, "A company is like Theseus' ship." At that time he didn't understand what it meant. He learned about Theseus' paradox later on. The ship that Theseus and the young people of Athens returned on had 30 oars. The people of Athens preserved the ship. The wooden ship rotted over time. As the planks rotted, they were replaced with new ones, and when the oars rotted, new ones were fitted in. Over 1,000 years of preserving and gradually replacing parts of the ship, it became difficult to find the original components. This led the philosophers of Athens to question, is this ship still the same ship or a different one? Objects can be replaced one by one until nothing of the original remains, yet it may still appear as the original. Businesses are the same. Samsung Electronics was established after the Korean War. Initially, it only assembled white goods using technology transferred from Japanese electronics companies. None of the employees from that time are still with the company, and none of the products produced then are still being made. The headquarters and factories have also been relocated multiple times. People changed, products changed, and locations changed, but Samsung Electronics remained Samsung Electronics. So, what truly defines Samsung Electronics as Samsung Electronics? A moment of clarity washed over Im Jin-young. His tangled thoughts were organized into a clear path. As the executives turned their attention to him, Im Jin-young looked around and began speaking. I will discontinue the sale of L6 starting today. Announce that all sold products will be refunded, and promise to provide adequate compensation to consumers who wish to exchange. For a moment, unease spread among the executives. Discontinuing was the worst possible choice, one too dreadful to even imagine. Having to refund all products sold until now and give up future sales was inevitable. The tarnishing of the company's image was unavoidable. Money lost can be earned back, But once a company loses trust, that's the end. By producing faulty products, we lost our customers' trust. And by recalling the products without resolving the issue, we lost trust again. This is our last chance. The voice was calm, but the tone was firm. Amidst silence, CEO Jo Dong-jun stood up from his seat. I will prepare the statement right away. 1:40 p.m. An emergency press conference was held at the Samsung Electronics Gangnam headquarters. IM Division CEO Jo Dong-jun stood before the journalists. With a heavy expression, he read from the prepared script. Samsung Electronics has decided to suspend sales and exchanges for the L6. While investigation and precise inspections are ongoing, we made this decision to prioritize customer safety. To all customers using L6, please turn off the power immediately and proceed with an exchange or refund. We deeply apologize once again to our loyal customers, partners, and suppliers for the inconvenience and worry imposed by this situation. Everyone was shocked by the unexpected discontinuation announcement. Journalists are bombarded with questions. Whose decision was this? What do you estimate the financial loss to be? Do you have any plans for after the discontinuation? CEO Jo Dong-jun calmly addressed the journalists' questions. Over 6 million L6 units have been sold thus far, with an expected sales target of 70 million. If all of these were to be refunded, a simple calculation would result in a loss of 6 trillion won. When considering the costs of the recall and inventory disposal, the monetary loss increases further. Not only did the expected future earnings disappear, but the market share decline, corporate image, and loss of trust in the smartphone market were even greater losses. Experts predicted that Samsung Electronics' losses from this incident would range from a minimum of 20 trillion to 50 trillion won. As the press conference ended, individuals shifted from buying to selling, following the selling by foreign investors and institutions, leading to programmatic selling, causing Samsung Electronics stock price to hit the daily limit. With no more buy orders, only sell orders kept accumulating. As Samsung Electronics, with the largest weighting in the index, plummeted, the Kospi index quickly dropped by over 100 points, triggering a circuit breaker and halting trading. The Kosdaq couldn't escape the fallout either. Although Samsung Electronics was not included in the index, IT-related component stocks were heavily hit. In a situation where Samsung Electronics hit the limit, small and medium-sized companies supplying Samsung Electronics had no way out. The related component stocks all hit the limit down. Compared to the Kospi, individual investors have a much higher proportion in the Kosdaq. As individuals started selling, unrelated pharmaceutical and travel stocks began to fall. Trading on the Kosdaq was halted for 5 minutes as a circuit breaker was triggered. While circuit breakers being activated on the Kosdaq are somewhat common, this was the first time it happened on the Kospi since the financial crisis. After 5 minutes, trading resumed, but the downward trend couldn't be stopped. There was a fear that it might fall even further as time passed, causing everyone to sell their stocks. The Kospi fell by 6.3% from the previous day's closing, while the Kosdaq fell by 8.7%. It was the beginning of what would be remembered as a Black Tuesday in the history of the Korean stock market. The ship of Theseus, also known as Theseus's paradox, is a thought experiment and paradox about whether an object is the same object after having all of its original components replaced over time, typically one after the other. In financial markets, particularly in stock exchanges, the terms upper limit and lower limit refer to the mechanisms that restrict the amount by which a stock's price can rise or fall within a single trading day. These limits are used to prevent extreme volatility and ensure market stability. Upper limit is the maximum price that a stock can reach during a single trading day. Once the price hits this limit, trading may be halted or restricted to prevent further increases. Purpose: the upper limit helps to control excessive volatility and speculative trading, ensuring that stock prices do not skyrocket uncontrollably within a single day. Example: if a stock has an upper limit of 30% and it is currently trading at 1,001, the stock cannot rise more than 30% above this price on that trading day. Therefore, the maximum price allowed would be 1,301. Lower limit is the minimum price that a stock can fall to during a single trading day. If the stock price hits this limit, trading may be halted or restricted to prevent further declines. Purpose: the lower limit serves to prevent panic selling and excessive drops in stock prices, protecting investors from sudden, severe losses. Example: if a stock has a lower limit of 30% and it is currently trading at 1,001, the stock cannot fall more than 30% below this price on that trading day. Therefore, the minimum price allowed would be 701. How they work equals in GD. Triggering: if a stock's price moves towards the upper or lower limit, the exchange might trigger a trading halt or impose restrictions to assess the situation and prevent further volatility. Sidecar mechanism: often used in conjunction with upper and lower limits, a sidecar temporarily suspends trading to manage extreme price movements and assess market conditions. During times of financial turmoil, these limits might be adjusted to accommodate heightened volatility or stabilize the market. Regulatory changes: the percentage limits and their implementation can vary by country and exchange. For instance, some markets may have more lenient or stricter limits based on their regulatory environment and market conditions. Recently, the Korean stock market has been driven by explosive growth in IT stocks. Both institutional investors and foreigners were increasing their target prices across the board and taking long positions. Samsung Electronics was breaking record highs and setting new all-time highs, and the stock market was following suit. Concerns started to arise that the market was overheated compared to the real economy, and there were expectations of a correction due to profit-taking. The sudden announcement of the discontinuation of the L6 at this point was like pouring cold water into a boiling furnace. Optimistic views faded away, replaced by pessimism. Not only Samsung Electronics but also related and unrelated stocks plummeted. Individual investors, overwhelmed by fear, started selling off their stocks, while foreign investors who had been sellers early in the session increased their selling instead of turning to buying. In the later part of the trading session, institutions started buying and even the pension funds joined in, but it was not enough to stop the downward trend. The Korea Exchange, as well as securities, asset management and fund companies, all found themselves in chaos. This turmoil also affected KYB Investment Securities, one of the largest securities firms in the country. Samsung Electronics hitting the lower limit was the first time since the 2008 financial crisis. However, the situations then and now were significantly different. During the financial crisis, not only Samsung Electronics but also various global companies were experiencing steep declines of tens of percentage points. Most notably, back then the daily price limit was restricted to 15%. However, it has been expanded to 30% today. This means that Samsung Electronics dropping by 30% is unprecedented in history. Following the release of L6, Samsung Electronics had been on an upward trend, and it was anticipated that its stock price would continue to rise, leading pension funds, and securities firms to hold a significant amount of Samsung Electronics shares. No one foresaw such a situation. Park Jong-il, the executive director in charge of securities at KYB Investment Securities, loosened his tie as he sat down at his desk. The graph on his monitor was frozen. Trading had been suspended due to sidecar activation. While it seemed like the storm had subsided momentarily, a larger aftermath would hit once trading resumed. The cell phone that had been ringing since before the market opened was still ringing incessantly. It was all calls and complaints from big clients. Unable to attend to each call as usual, it had been set to silent for a long time. Knock knock. With a knock, manager Kim Woon-young entered. "Have you found it, Director Park? Have you calculated the loss on the put options? We are currently assessing. Depending on the event, but KOSPI 200 put options are at several hundred times level N. What about Samsung Electronics put options?" Manager Kim Woon-young replied with a bowed head, "It's over 1,000 times." Director Park Jong-il closed his eyes tightly. He had already anticipated it, but hearing it firsthand made him feel distant and numb. Samsung Electronics suffered a loss of 30% in spot prices after hitting the lower limit, but the problem lay in the derivatives. Until then, put options were insignificant and call options were within the exercise range. However, with the sudden announcement, the situation completely reversed. All call options were out of the exercise range, while all put options became exercisable. One might think it's a good thing, but the exercise price for call options was not significant. On the other hand, the exercise price for put options skyrocketed to several hundred times more than the issue price. The extent of the loss was unfathomable. Hundreds of billions. Thousands of billions. The derivatives market was essentially where blind money grabbing took place for small investors. Small investors aiming for a jackpot were simply giving money to financial institutions. But now it had unexpectedly turned into a boomerang. All securities firms that issued put options would find it difficult to avoid losses this quarter. That was why stock prices of securities were already plummeting by more than 10%. Perhaps some small to medium-sized financial institutions will find it difficult to avoid bankruptcy. Manager Park Jong-il gave instructions. Check the status of derivatives, find out how much ELWs and put option payments are, check the issued ELS knock-in levels, and find a way to minimize losses on options at expiration. Understood. Even after the conversation ended, team leader Kim Woon-young did not leave the room. When manager Park Jong-il looked at him, he cautiously spoke up. There is something I'd like to mention. What is it? I'm not entirely sure, but it seems like before the incident occurred, there was heavy buying of Samsung Electronics put options on the Golden Gate side. What? Upon hearing this, manager Park Jong-il felt a shock akin to being hit on the head with a hammer. What could this possibly mean? Are you suggesting that Golden Gate had prior information and bought these options? Kim Woon-young shook his head. At first I thought so too, but it doesn't seem likely. Golden Gate also suffered significant losses from this incident. Golden Gate had also issued various put options based on the KOSPI 200 and Samsung Electronics. They too would have to pay hundreds of times the issuance value. If they had insider information, they would have sold futures and spot contracts when buying put options, but there was no such movement. If Golden Gate had obtained information faster than others, they would have disposed of all their futures and spot contracts when buying put options. They weren't sitting still to just overturn their losses. So, it seems that a specific corporation acquired through Golden Gate. However one chooses to invest, it's up to them. However, it's a bit strange that it's not Jisu, but someone focused on buying specific stock put options. If the predictions turned out right, it would be fine, but if they were wrong, that money would have entirely gone to the issuing companies. Unless you knew the information in advance. If this was due to insider trading, it's usually a big problem. Director Park Jong-il gave instructions. Find out who it is. Also, confirm how they obtained the information. Understood. Team leader Kim Woon-young turned and left the room. Only 1 minute remained until the trading suspension was lifted. Director Park Jong-il muttered while looking at his watch. Who on earth could it be? Staring at the falling stock prices, you and I were speechless. Both the KOSPI and KOSDAQ indices, which were hitting record highs, had rolled back several months. Samsung Electronics, which hit a record high of 1,797,000 won the day before, suddenly dropped to 1,258,000 won. It was below its 52-week low. When we shorted and bought put options, our average price was 1.6 million won. We not only recovered our losses from shorting at once but also made over 20% profit. And it was an understatement to call the put options a huge success. Options that were worth almost nothing until yesterday were now all exercisable. Some had increased hundreds of times, while others had risen more than 1,000 times. Of course, this is in comparison to when it crashed. Looking at our purchase prices, it's much lower. Stocks aren't a zero-sum game. In an open market, everyone can either profit together or incur losses together. However, short selling and options trading are structurally linked in a way that someone's loss always connects to someone else's gain. What was a disaster for everyone turned out to be a blessing for us. In stock communities, whispers started to emerge. Having a meetup at Hongang today. Recruiting for a bungee jump from Mapo Bridge. This feels like hell for ants, doesn't it? If the sidecar opens, will it drop even more? I wish this were a dream. For now, we must go after I'm Jin Yong first. Wrap your whole body in L6 and rush to Seosung Electronics Gangnam building. I want to throw L6 at Jo Dong-jun's face. If we resell the collected L6 to IS, can we reduce the loss a bit? On the other hand, very few investors who invested in inverse ETFs or put options erupted into cheers. Bought leveraged inverse ETF yesterday, up by plus 13.8% in just one day. KOSPI 200 put option 270 times leverage. It's almost like a once-in-a-decade put party. I lived waiting for this day. How much would it be if I had Samsung Electronics put option? Thank you, Vice Chairman Im Jin-yong and President Jo Dong-jun. Thanks to you, I recovered all the money I lost from stock trading over the past 20 years in just one day. The put guys must be all smiles today. Haha. I'm the put man who caught Samsung Electronics put. Going to the Lamborghini store today and selecting an Aventador alongside my foot picture for the proof shot. Whoosh. Taekyu blinked his eyes and asked, "Is this a true story?" The situation is unbelievable and I myself feel the same way. I wished so desperately for things to turn out this way, but when it actually happened it didn't feel real. My head was spinning as if I were dreaming. It can't be a dream. Taekyu shouted loudly, holding both of my arms. Wow. We are rich now. I burst into laughter watching Taekyu cheer. Actually, you were always rich. But now, a billionaire became a multi-billionaire. Taekyu pulled me into a tight hug. I love you, buddy. Normally, I would have pushed him away questioning what guys were doing, but I hugged Taekyu back and shouted. We did it. The previous day, Samsung Electronics closed trading at the limit down, and the next day it opened with a 2.7% decrease, starting at 1,224,000 won. Fortunately, there was a rebound in buying momentum, and it managed to recover with a 2.4% increase to close at 1,288,000 won. The market, which showed signs of panic the previous day, barely regained stability with a 0.95% rise in the index. The next day was the option expiration date. Samsung Electronics announced through the media a refund policy and an exchange program, revealing an early launch of NT6, a derivative model of AL6, to minimize the impact of discontinuing AL6. With the support of institutions and pension funds buying, the Samsung Electronics stock price on the option expiration date rose by 6.6% to 1,373,000 won, and both the Kospi and Kosdaq rose by over 2%. The prices of the dollar, gold, and oil all fell, showing stability in the financial markets. From the moment Samsung Electronics hit the lower limit, we embarked on options selling. However, the put options had already skyrocketed ridiculously, reaching a point where selling was impossible in the market. Finally, the options expiration date arrived. We liquidated our short positions and secured profits. The final rate of return is 5,170%. 685 billion. With profits exceeding 50 times the investment capital, our initial 13 billion won investment swelled to 685 billion won. That's a lot of zeros. Long positions. This refers to buying stocks or other financial instruments with the expectation that their price will rise. Investors who take long positions profit if the asset increases in value. Overheated market. This describes a market that has risen too quickly and may be due for a correction. An overheated market can lead to inflated asset prices not supported by underlying economic fundamentals. Correction. A market correction is a decline of 10% or more in the price of a stock or index from its recent peak. Corrections are typically seen as a natural part of market cycles. Put options. These are financial contracts that give the owner the right but not the obligation to sell a stock at a predetermined price before a specific date. They are often used to hedge against declines in stock prices or to speculate on downward price movements. Call options. These contracts give the owner the right to buy a stock at a set price before a certain date. They are typically used if an investor expects the stock price to increase. Sidecar. In the context of stock markets, a sidecar is a mechanism used to temporarily halt trading to prevent excessive volatility. It is often triggered when stock prices move too dramatically in a short period. Derivatives. Financial instruments whose value is derived from the value of an underlying asset, such as options and futures contracts. Derivatives can be used for hedging or speculative purposes. Exercise price. The price at which an option can be exercised, i.e., the price at which the holder of the option can buy or sell the underlying asset. LWs, equity-linked warrants. Financial instruments that give the holder the right to buy or sell an underlying stock at a certain price before expiration. They are similar to options but are issued by financial institutions. Plus, equity-linked securities. Structured products linked to the performance of a basket of stocks or indices. They offer a fixed or variable return depending on the performance of the underlying assets. Leverage. Using borrowed funds to increase the potential return on an investment. High leverage can lead to higher returns but also increases risk. Inverse ETF. An exchange-traded fund designed to profit from a decline in the value of the underlying index or asset. These are often used as a hedge or for speculative purposes. Kospi 200. A stock market index in South Korea, representing the 200 largest companies listed on the Korean exchange. Spot prices. The current market price at which an asset can be bought or sold for immediate delivery. Exercise range. The price range within which an option can be exercised profitably. When Taekyu saw the amount in OTK Company's account, he was stunned. 685 billion won. Even as he checked the balance with his own eyes, he couldn't believe it. Today he realized for the first time that he could earn this much money. Taekyu said, sounding regretful, "It would have been a real jackpot if the expiration date had been further down. If it had dropped further, the profits would have exceeded 1 trillion won." Despite showing a passive stance during trading hours, institutional investors and pension funds concentrated on buying a whopping 3 trillion won in the closing auction with just over 2 minutes left until the market closed. It was truly a buying explosion. There was also counter-buying due to overselling, but it was a desperate measure to raise stock prices in line with the option's expiration date to reduce losses. It was almost like stock manipulation. However, if the decline had continued until today, the financial companies that issued the options would have gone bankrupt one after another. The government and financial institutions would have had no choice. As the stock price rose on the option's expiration date, our rate of return decreased significantly. Nonetheless, it was an extraordinary rate of return. Just looking at the numbers in the account might make your head spin. Why are there so many zeros? Don't they need to do a redenomination or something? Taekyu asked me. How much should I give you? We agreed to split the profits evenly. Out of the 685 billion won, 130 billion was the initial investment, and the profit was 672 billion. Half of that is mine. Taekyu finished his calculation and said, "It's 336 billion won, right?" If you stack enough bundles of money, would it reach the height of a building? Until not so long ago, I was a penniless worrywart who had to think about the future only until discharge. But now it seems that 336 billion has come into my possession. Can I really accept such a tremendous amount of money? Investments come with both profits and losses. Since I've only invested 800 million of my own capital, if there were to be any losses, Taekyu would have had to bear most of it. In fact, just a few days ago we were facing losses of tens of billions. Thinking back on everything I've been through, it feels a bit guilty to take half of the profits. Taekyu seemed to understand my words and nodded as if in agreement. So you won't take it? Well, I'm grateful then. I shook my head firmly. No, that's not it. Taekyu chuckled softly. Well, if it weren't for you, 13 billion would have gone down the drain. You wouldn't have been able to turn that 13 billion into 685 billion anyway. I provided the information and Taekyu invested the capital. Depending on the perspective, opinions on who played a bigger role may differ. But generally, most people tend to think their contribution is greater. However, Taekyu promised right from the start to give me half without hesitation, and he intends to keep that promise. How rare is such a person in this world? But suddenly, a sinister feeling crept in. If this is the extent of precognition, I only foresaw the discontinuation of a single cell phone model. Yet I earned billions. What if I had foreseen 9/11, the financial crisis? What if I predicted wars or natural disasters? It felt like electricity running through my spine. As if sharing my thoughts, Taekyu spoke. Perhaps it's best not to tell anyone about the Oracle Eye. I agree. Our expressions were grave, unlike before. We both realized how remarkable the ability of foresight truly was. What do you think would happen if this gets out? Would they drag us to some government agency? But there are many people who boast about having foresight abilities. Among them are fortune tellers, palm readers, tarot card readers, psychics, prophets, and even day traders, probably the most abundant group. The reason there are so many purported individuals with foresight abilities in the world is that there is no way to validate their claims. Physical abilities like telekinesis can be objectively verified. However, foresight, since it is seen only by the individual possessing it, cannot be validated. But they predict the future as if either it will happen or not. Those people may be fake, but you're different. If you truly had the gift of foresight, why would you bother reading palms or tarot cards on the streets? You could easily make money by flipping cards in a casino or just by trading stocks. You make a good point. Only Taekyu and I know about this ability. He is the only person besides my mother whom I can truly trust. I will not tell anyone about the potential of this being beneficial to me. After the serious conversation ended, Taekyu chuckled again. By the way, we made a fortune. Upon hearing those words, I felt a bit uneasy. While the financial market had barely regained stability, the future outlook was dim. The operating profit consensus for Samsung Electronics kept dropping, and with smartphone exports faltering, it was anticipated that the trade balance would worsen from the next month onwards. On the other hand, the stock prices of Apple and Chinese companies, expected to gain from the situation, surged. Is it morally right for us to profit like this in such a national crisis? Taekyu seemed to agree with what I said without hesitation. What does it matter? It's not like we manipulated anything. True. Even if we hadn't done anything, L6 would have collapsed, Samsung Electronics would have hit its bottom limit, and the Kospi and Kosdaq would have plummeted. And amidst everyone losing money, someone must have made a profit. Right now we're the ones reaping that profit. It's all thanks to Oracle Eye. But that wasn't the only reason. No matter how good the information is, it's useless if you don't have money to invest. If Taekyu hadn't believed in my words and invested, we would have missed the opportunity and been left sucking our thumbs. Even if people hear the same story, how many would actually go as far as to invest? I'm not sure if he's intuitive or thoughtless. But listen. Yeah. How are you going to receive the money? If it goes into your account, you'll have to pay taxes. Transferring money from an overseas corporation to a domestic one incurs taxes. With an amount in the tens of billions, the tax rate reaches up to 50%. The tax alone exceeds 1.6 trillion. Moreover, there arises the issue of proving the source of the money. Do you want to receive it in cash? 3.36 billion? How many 50,000 won bills can fit in an Apple box? Even if we assume 6 billion can fit in one box, it's still over 500 boxes. Wait, can you even withdraw 3.36 billion in cash? That's 6.72 million bills of 50,000 won each. I never imagined I would be troubled by such a problem. I wonder what the best course of action would be. Should I also create a corporate entity for tax avoidance purposes? While I was deeply contemplating this, Taekyu asked, "What are you thinking of doing with this money?" asked Taekyu. Me. Well, I don't have anything specific in mind. But doesn't it feel too unsatisfying to just end it like this? Taekyu replied as he looked at me. You invested 13 billion and made 67 billion. If you reinvest this money, can't you make even more? Let's think realistically. The reason you were able to make 50 times your initial amount of 13 billion was because the size of the capital was small. Once the capital grows to hundreds of billions, making such a profit at once becomes impossible. However, with such a large capital, if you can consistently generate profit, you can earn a tremendous sum. I remembered the discussion on doubling. Folding a newspaper 20 times makes it over 100 meters long. If you fold it 10 more times, it's over 100 kilometers. By betting 1 billion at a casino and continuously betting the winnings for 20 rounds, you can earn 104,008,576 billion. If you add just 10 more rounds, it's over 1 quadrillion. Money moves the world in today's highly developed capitalist society. With money you can even save lives. This is not a metaphor. In some countries in Africa, children are dying from malaria and malnutrition. Lives that could be saved with just a $1 pill and food are being neglected due to lack of money. With just one investment you earn more money than you could spend in a lifetime. It's enough to live extravagantly without doing anything more. But, is this enough? Is it right to be satisfied at this level and call it quits? I remembered the prophecy I saw on a drunken night. A CEO is the chief executive officer. The CEO doesn't necessarily have to be the largest shareholder. Perhaps that means I will be teaming up with Taekyu to run OTK company together in the future? I reached out my hand to Taekyu. Take my hand. If I do, we'll go all the way together. Taekyu looked back and forth between my face and my hand. What if I don't? Then I'll go all the way alone. After a moment of thought, Taekyu firmly grabbed my hand. We may not know how far we'll go, but let's go together just this once. Ha ha. Ha ha ha. We looked at each other and burst into laughter. We found a simple solution to the issue of dividing money. Let's transfer the investment capital to Korea for now. And let's revise the corporate name. We'll split the current 100% ownership of OTK company equally between us. In this case, since the money is still in the overseas corporation, there is no need to pay taxes in Korea. Dividing the corporate ownership is considered a gift, but Ireland is also tax-exempt for gifts. What do you think? For some reason there was no response. Taekyu seemed to be deeply contemplating something, and after a while he spoke up. Do you still have the contract I gave you before? I put it in my wallet. Let me see it for a moment. Without much thought I took out the contract and handed it over. Taekyu unfolded the contract, then suddenly grabbed it with both hands and began tearing it apart. Rip rip. In an instant the contract turned into dozens of torn pieces scattered around. Perplexed by the unexpected situation, I asked, "What are you doing, man?" Taekyu replied with a stern expression, "Upon further consideration, splitting it evenly doesn't make sense." What? How about an 80-20 split? I was at a loss for words. Judging by his expression, it didn't seem like he was joking. Is he suggesting that only I get 20% and he takes the rest? Is he planning to stab me in the back at this point? In a world where money can even lead people to kill, it wouldn't be surprising for someone to change their mind when faced with billions. Yet this doesn't seem like his usual character. Seeing my disbelief, Taekyu continued speaking. "You take 80, I'll take 20. What is he talking about now?" Feeling like I might have misheard, I looked at Taekyu again, who repeated, "You take 80%. I'll take 20%. After a moment, I regained my composure and asked, "Are you serious?" Of course I am serious. I still couldn't grasp the situation. Why the sudden change? Weren't we planning to split everything evenly until just now? That was before. But do you plan to go all the way with it? What does that have to do with anything? Taekyu calmly explained, "Think about it. Precognition is real. With that ability you can make as much money as you want. Initially I put up most of the capital while you provided the foresight, but now you have capital too. Eventually, if we split the capital equally and you do all the work, does it make sense to split the profits evenly?" That's. As he said, with the newfound capital of 336 billion won, it was entirely possible for me to invest on my own. Despite that, extending a hand to Taekyu was a better choice for several reasons beyond just friendship or loyalty. While 672 billion won was an unimaginable sum for ordinary people in the financial market where trillions moved, it was still a modest amount. It was more advantageous for me to move as one entity than to split this sum into two and operate independently. But I'm still willing to give up 30% of my stake? From the total perspective, it's 30%, but from his standpoint it's 60%. Over 200 billion won in value. Taekyu smiled. "Putting money where it can grow is investing, right? That's why I want to invest in you. Even if I give up around 200 billion now, the 20% of future profits from OTK company belongs to me, right? But what if we don't make any profits in the future? However, it doesn't matter. It's money that we won't even be able to use until we die. The fact that we earned this much is all thanks to you. Even if I made 100 billion from one thing, I thought it was a huge success. I feel the same way too. I never imagined making over 50 times the profit in one shot. You're not going to invest just once or twice in the future, you're going to see it through to the end. If you're going to lead it, you'll need that much stake. If it's 80%, then I'll end up running the company," Taekyu said, placing his hand on my shoulder. "That's right. From now on you're the manager of OTK company. You're studying management, so you'll do well in running it, right?" Although Nuna said so, it had only been a year. I sighed and replied, "If someone hears that, they might think I have an MBA. Why pursue American pro basketball? What's that for?" "That's the NBA." There was no hint of hesitation in Taekyu's expression. He had already made up his mind. Does the vision of me becoming CEO of OTK company mean this? Do you have no regrets? To my question, Taekyu responded firmly, "Of course not." I felt ashamed for even momentarily doubting my friend. At first, when I heard the suggestion to invest together, I thought it was nonsense. But ultimately Taekyu was right. Suddenly I had this thought. Perhaps he is the one looking at this situation most objectively. I nodded my head. "Hey, let's do that." With this, the ownership issue was resolved. "What about dinner?" I ordered from a Chinese restaurant. Please let's eat. As the Jajangmyeon, Jampong and Tangsiuk arrived, we took our seats in front of the TV. It had become a routine to watch the news while having dinner. The news began with the discontinuation of the L6 model. Smartphones are one of Korea's major export items. With the fallout from the discontinuation of the L6 model, it was clear that the trade balance would worsen starting from this month. Samsung Electronics immediately began refunds and exchanges after the announcement. Once again, over 6 million L6 units had been sold until now, with refund amounts totaling over 6 trillion won. It was expected that this would lead to considerable losses for Samsung Electronics. However, surprisingly, the demand for refunds was less than 5%. Most consumers chose exchanges over refunds. While Apple only releases a premium phone once a year, Samsung Electronics offers not just the premium L series but also quarterly releases of the mid-range K series and J series. Though the discontinuation of the premium phone was a bitter pill to swallow, the swift implementation of the exchange program using different lineup models was well received. The balanced lineup proved its strength. The high brand loyalty of Samsung Electronics customers also played a significant role in this. Thanks to this, Samsung Electronics could breathe a sigh of relief. With institutional buying pouring in at option expiration dates, Samsung Electronics saw a significant rise the next day, fueled by foreign buying, climbing nearly 5% again. Although still far from its previous levels, it was a sign of recovery from the shock. It's quite an achievement to weather a crisis of this magnitude that could have spelt disaster for most companies. This must be the true capability of Samsung Electronics, right? After the news related to the L6 ended, there was a report on Christmas. The reporter went to Myeongdong where a large tree was set up, to share the Christmas spirit with the viewers. By the way, Christmas is coming next week. Oh. When did time fly by so quickly? When I was in the military, the time that used to drag on suddenly flowed at the speed of light after my discharge. Taekyu asked me, looking at me, "What did you do last Christmas?" "Well, I think I was cleaning up the trash falling from the sky." I asked Taekyu, "What about you?" "I had dinner with your mother." "Oh." Worrying about my mother being alone on Christmas, I called Taekyu. Without a lover or friends to meet, Taekyu immediately ran to our house upon my request. Still, there would be no one else but him who would take care of our mother on Christmas. Already Christmas. I need to hurry a bit. I told Taekyu, "Send 800 million to my account first." We decided to transfer the investment capital to Korea first. Out of 13.8 billion, my share is 800 million and Taekyu's share is 13 billion. Can you receive all that at once? We need to handle the taxes properly. Let's sort out the tax for the previous 500 million sent as well. It's better to eliminate potential problems in advance. Wait. Where could the money I received from my sister before be? After rummaging through the desk for a moment, Taekyu picked up a note hidden under the food bowls. On the white paper stained with kimchi soup was the name, Yu Sungmu, Golden Gate Gangnam Branch Manager, written with a contact number. But what do you want to do with that money? I want to buy some Christmas gifts. Located on the outskirts of Dongtan Future Real Estate. It was 2 years ago that Ju Mi-young obtained her real estate agent license and opened a real estate agency. She had worked hard, but establishing herself was not easy. Ju Mi-young let out a sigh inwardly. I barely made it this month. In order to not fall behind on rent, I need to close some deals. As she was thinking this, a young man with a bag slung over his shoulder walked in. Welcome. Hello. She quickly made him a cup of instant coffee and placed it in front of him. Judging by his age and attire, he seemed like a university student looking for a studio apartment. The commission for handling a studio apartment lease was a few 100,000 won. Even so, she desperately needed deals like that now. This time she must make sure to close the deal. Smiling, Ju Mi-young spoke. Are you looking for a studio apartment? There happens to be a nice one available. It's a new studio apartment with a good landlord and the rent is affordable. How about going to see it now? The young man shook his head. I'm looking into houses. How much is the average house price in this area? Usually for house rentals. I'm not looking to rent but to buy. Oh. I want to buy a house. Buy a house. Ju Mi-young was taken aback but kindly began to explain. Prices for houses vary greatly depending on the location, size of the land and the building. Some may go for 300 million, while there are also luxury homes that exceed 1 billion. The young man pointed outside the glass window. Then how much would that house cost? There was an old two-story house where his finger was pointing. Roughly around 500 to 600 million. The young man nodded in understanding. I want to buy that house. Judging by his expression, it didn't seem like he was joking. Is he really planning to buy the house? The brokerage fee alone for a sales contract is in the millions of won. Just closing one deal was as good as a month's worth of work. Ju Mi-young's expression brightened. If there's a similar house on the market, I'll look into it. To which the young man responded. No. I want to buy that house. Really? After a moment, Ju Mi-young understood what the young man meant. He doesn't want any other house but that specific one? Bewildered, Ju Mi-young said. That house is not on the market. I know. But what if we offer more than the market price? The owner might still consider selling, right? That could be so, but, trailed off Ju Mi-young. Why pay more for that specific house than its market value when he could buy a better one? What was the reason that made him so determined to buy that particular house? As Ju Mi-young pondered, the young man unzipped the bag beside him. Since the market price is 600 million, let's go for around 800 million. What the young man took out from his bag was a bundle of 50,000 won bills. 6 bundles were neatly placed on the table. One bundle is 5 million won. 30 million won? Surprised, Ju Mi-young was told by the young man. If the deal goes well, I'll give this money as a commission fee. Seeing the money piled on the table, Ju Mi-young swallowed nervously. This is amazing. Living in a single-family home is something that many people dream of at least once. Around 2 years ago, housewife Kim Mi-ja bought a 2-story single-family home located on the outskirts of a new town through an auction and moved in. But what seemed great was only temporary. As time passed, there were not just 1 or 2 inconveniences. Her husband complained about the difficult commute, and the children complained about the distance to school. The building, which was built 20 years ago, was starting to show signs of aging, with more than just a couple of areas needing repairs. Major repairs were needed, but due to cost issues, they could only manage temporary fixes. New apartments were constantly being built in the new town. She even considered selling the house to move to an apartment. Kim Mi-ja visited a trusted real estate agency to casually inquire about the housing market price. The current market price was around 600 million. However, selling the house at market value was difficult compared to apartments. Taking into account the repairs needed in various places, the real estate agent suggested lowering the price to the mid-500 million range for a quicker sale. While still pondering this, one day she received a call from the real estate agency. A young couple came to look at the houses nearby. They seem to like your place, Mrs. Kim Mi-ja. Are you considering selling? Her ears perked up at the news. She wasn't entirely against selling at market value. How much are they willing to offer? They mentioned 800 million as they were not familiar with the prices in the area, and they said they would buy it. Kim Mi-ja was taken aback. They were willing to pay 200 million more than the market price. With that money, she could afford a luxury apartment in a prime location nearby. Although she had originally thought of selling, the idea of buying at a good price changed her mind. Could there be a hidden value in this house that she wasn't aware of? No matter how much she thought about it, there seemed to be no reason for this house to be more expensive than the market price. It was far from the subway station and the transportation wasn't that great either. With that money, she could buy a much better house near the subway station. Okay, hold on a moment. I'll think about it a bit more. Kim Mi-ja consulted with her husband who had returned from work. While he suggested selling immediately upon hearing the situation, her thoughts were slightly different. There must be a good reason for wanting to sell at a higher price. Kim Mi-ja called the real estate agent and said, I won't sell for 800 million, but if it's 1 billion, let them know I will sell. She planned to negotiate after hearing their initial response. The next day the real estate agent called again. However, what the agent said was unexpected. What should I do? They want to make a deal with Hyo-jong's mother. They even visited her house that day. Oh, how much are they offering? 760 million. Although Hyo-jong's mother's house was larger and better, 760 million was an unreasonable price. It felt like a spark flew in her eyes. This lady is trying to steal my client? It felt like money was slipping away right in front of her. In reality, it was like losing 200 million considering the actual selling price. She felt like she was kicking away the fortune that had rolled in by herself. When the potential buyer hesitated, Kim Mija became anxious. If the contract hasn't been signed yet, then tell them I will also sell for 760 million. However, it seems like their interest has already shifted towards Hyojong's mother's house. I'm not sure if they will change their mind again. Please negotiate well. I will prepare a generous tip. I earnestly ask for your help. All right, I will discuss it with them. Time passed anxiously. A few days later, the real estate agent made contact. After persuading successfully, Mija's mother decided to sign the contract with Mrs. Kim's joy. Mrs. Kim happily said, "Thank you for your hard work. How about receiving the down payment before you change your mind over there? Typically, 10% is received, but as market prices may change later and minds may change, why not take around 30% now?" "I will do that. I will send you the account number now." As soon as she sent the account number, a down payment of 228 million won was deposited. With this, the real estate transaction was practically finalized. Mrs. Kim, relieved and happy, was told by the real estate lady, "Then come to the real estate office tomorrow to formally draft the contract." As Mija's mother knows, Christmas is in 4 days. "Yes. It might be tough, but can you vacate the house by then?" Mrs. Kim was confused. "Wait, I haven't even found a new house to move to, and you expect me to vacate in 4 days? Exactly right. If you vacate by then, they say they'll add 20 million won for moving expenses." What? 20 million won? I'll let them know it's not possible." Angered by the real estate lady's words, she retorted, "What do you mean not possible? Find us a house by the day after tomorrow." Jingle bell. Jingle bell. Carols echoed throughout and trees and decorations were put up. Despite the economic downturn, the shopping districts were enjoying the Christmas and year-end specials. Couples linked arms as they poured into the streets. Well, that has nothing to do with me. When did Christmas become a day for lovers anyway? I went inside my house. Are you ready? My mother was already dressed for going out. She had taken out a 2-piece suit and coat that she rarely wore and put on makeup. "You look beautiful today. It suits you well. What's the point of looking pretty?" My mother said with a hint of sarcasm. "We can just eat at home, why eat out? On a day like today we have to eat out. Let's go." I went downstairs with my mother. A taxi was waiting on the first floor. Taekyu is also coming along. Taekyu said, "Get in, ma'am." I got into the back seat with my mother. It was a compact car, so it was a bit cramped, but it was manageable. Taekyu started the car. It wasn't yet rush hour, so we quickly left Seoul. "Where are we going?" "Just wait for a good place." The car sped along the straight road. Ring. My phone vibrated in my pocket. There were only a few people who knew this phone number. When I saw the name on the screen, it was Shin Yuri. I hesitated about whether to answer or not, then pressed the call button. "Hello." Yuri's voice sounded scary to pick up. "Senior Jin, why haven't you been answering my calls? I've been calling you." "You've been calling?" Since I didn't pay attention to my phone, I hadn't even checked the missed calls properly. But why did she keep calling a senior whom she had only seen twice? And on Christmas Day of all days. Unless she had feelings for me. "Yuri, you didn't happen to?" Before I could finish my sentence, Yuri urgently spoke. "What's wrong, senior?" "Huh. What's wrong?" "It's about L6. "Oh, you also bought one? Did you get a refund?" "That's not the important part. How did you know in advance that L6 was going to be discontinued?" "What do you mean? How would I know that?" "After buying the phone when we were leaving the store you said it. That it was going to be discontinued." "Did I say something like that?" "Come to think of it, I might have. So that's why she kept calling. I should stop drinking so much kimchi soup." I fumbled for words. I was just joking." Yuri's reaction was one of bewilderment. "It was a joke?" "Yeah. Didn't I say it was a joke back then too?" "But..." It's getting hard to come up with excuses if she keeps on asking. "I'm on my way somewhere now. I'll contact you later. Merry Christmas." "Senior." I quickly hung up the phone. Surely they didn't catch on with just one word, right? My mother asked, "Who was it?" Just a school junior. I checked the texts and chats I received during this time. Most of them were spam. As I deleted the useless ones, a text message from Senior Sanjiop stood out. I couldn't reach you on the phone, so leaving a message. Please contact me when you see this. Senior Sanjiop must have also been shocked upon hearing about the discontinuation of the L6. I decided to contact him later and put my phone back in my pocket. After about an hour of driving, the familiar neighborhood came into view. As expected, my mother immediately caught on. Is this... We're almost there now. The place the car stopped at was a residential area on the outskirts of Dongtan. I got out of the car with my mother. In front of us stood an old two-story detached house. My mother silently gazed at the old house. She must be reminiscing about the memories from here. She had lived here for over 20 years. After a while, my mother smiled and said, "It's nice to be here after all. Memories of the past come back. Now that we've seen it, let's go back. Since we're already here, let's go inside and take a look." I confidently opened the door with my bewildered mother and walked inside. The house was clean and empty. Some things like the wallpaper or the living room lights had changed, but the house was mostly the same as before. I ran my hand along the old pillars and stairs. My mother slowly looked around the house. Looks like they moved. But is it okay to come in without permission like this? Why would this be someone else's house? This is our home. It had just temporarily slipped into someone else's hands. I handed over some documents to my mother. Take a look at this. What is this? My mother unfolded the papers. It was nothing but a real estate contract with her name on it. This house is ours now. If we had more time, we could have bought it more cheaply, but we rushed to get it before Christmas. Still, I didn't feel like any of it was a waste. My mother looked unbelieving. How did this happen? I earned money with Taikyu's help and bought it. My mother glanced at Taikyu. He nodded in agreement. Jinhu is right. We made a lot of money. My mother stood in silence for a while. Then she sat down and burst into tears. Ever since my father passed away, my mother never showed any emotions no matter how tough things were. She hadn't shed a single tear in front of me all this time. If it wasn't hard and sad, it would be a lie. I just gritted my teeth and endured it. Sob, sob, sob. Seeing my mother crying, I felt like I might burst into tears as well. I forced a smile and said, "Why cry on such a nice day? Please don't cry." As I tried to console my crying mother, I heard another sound of sobbing from beside me. Turning my head, I saw Taikyu pouring out tears from one side. Sob. Sob. Perplexed, I asked, "Hey, why are you crying?" "You are Jinhu." Instead of stopping his tears, Taikyu hugged me and started wailing loudly. "Stop crying, come on. If you keep crying, even I will feel like crying."